One of my favorite movies of all time is The Sting. Classic Robert Redford, Paul Newman. If you haven't seen it, you need to. Love that movie, but I've got to confess that the first time Mary and I saw it was extremely frustrating because we arrived 5 minutes late. And if you miss the first 5 minutes of The Sting, you don't have a clue what's going on and why for the rest of the movie. In fact, we had to go back and see it a second time, at which point I went, oh, that's the deal. The Bible is very, very much written that same way. If you don't catch what happens in the first few chapters of Genesis, you can miss the plot of the whole story. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Thanks for being here. If you're our guest, I'm Dan Southerland, one of the pastors at Westside Family Church. My privilege to talk today. So whether you're joining us online or at one of our locations here in Kansas City, you're going to need to take notes like a banshee because we are going to cover lots of ground. Are you ready? We're in Genesis 1. I hope you have read your first chapter of the story this week, which covers the first part of the book of Genesis. The story opens with 3 big bangs. Not one, not 2, 3 big bangs. And the first big bang is the big bang of creation. Think about this, guys. Scripture says Jesus spoke the world into existence. Now, if you can speak words and creation happens, that is one amazing Big Bang. I always love it when folks who believe in a Big Bang idea say, yeah, there was just some cataclysmic, coincidental events and this Big Bang occurred. And I love asking them, who banged it? I mean, yeah, I'll buy that. Who banged it? They say, I don't know who banged it. I say, I do. Come here. Look at Genesis 1. God started creation when he spoke it into existence. So here's some things to write down. The story's main character is God. It's not you, it's not me, it's God. I love when Chevy Chase used to start Saturday Night Live by saying, I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. And once in a while, I think God, particularly here in Genesis 1, is saying, I'm God, you're not. In fact, let's have some fun. Turn to your neighbor and say, you're clearly not God. Go ahead and tell him. It's not even close. Let's just get that straight to start with. Yeah, he's the main character. I'll never forget, I was in a civics class in high school, and the only reason you go to a civics class is because it's required. And I went to this class, and I had just become a Christ follower, and I was right at that point in my journey where I'd carry my big leather Bible to school, and I'd read it before class, and I'd read it during class, because this is a lot more exciting than civics. And I had all of these colored markers, and I'd mark stuff and underline and circle. So before class starts, I've got my Bible open. I have my red flare pen in my hand. Now, if you know what a red flare pen is, you know we're talking early 70s here. And I've got it. And the teacher walks up before we start and says, may I? And takes the red pen out of my hand. Now, when a teacher has a red pen, it's not usually good. But he opens my Bible to Genesis 1, and he circles the first 4 words. In the beginning, God. And he looks me in the eye and he says, don't you ever forget, this story starts with God and it ends with God. Now, I don't remember anything else he said all year. But he got that part right. I mean, he really got it right. God is the main character. And the story's opening act, would you write this in, is creation. Only God could speak creation into existence. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So when science occasionally talks about the Big Bang, it sounds a little bit impersonal. It sounds a little bit accidental. That's not the case. The Big Bang is not an impersonal accident, but it is the creative purpose of a personal God. Would you write those two words in? And you're going to hear those two words a lot in the next year, because God is always working with a purpose, and He is always personal about it. He wants a personal relationship with you and with me. So the account in Genesis, this is important, listen to this, tells us what God created, and it tells us who does the creating. It's God. It tells us who, and it tells us what. It does not tell us how it happened. It does not tell us how long. But here's some of the things that it says. Are you ready? Days 1, 2, and 3 in the creation story, God forms spaces. Now, you are God if you can create space. I mean, creating space is a big deal. Most of us do well to create something to fill up the space. God creates the space. On day 1, He creates light and dark. You know, I'm able to operate a light switch to turn it on and off in a room, but I'm just not able to walk outside and say, night now, and all of a sudden it becomes night. Or to walk outside and say, daylight now, and all of a sudden that space is filled with light. God creates light and dark. That's His first space. That's the first space He creates. Day 2, He creates sky and water. Sky and water. And I got to tell you, some of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen are at the ocean when the sun is setting over the water. And there are days where you can hardly tell where the ocean stops and the sky begins, except for that red dot getting smaller and smaller and smaller. On day 3, it tells us God creates land. Now, I'd like to be able to do that one. I mean, seriously, they're not making any more land. If you could create some land, would that be cool? If I could, I'd just go up and create like a few hundred acres near Speedway, and we'd have a Speedway campus. You know, that'd be incredible. He creates all of this. Days 1, 2, and 3, God creates spaces. Days 4, 5, and 6, God fills those spaces. He fills those spaces with things. What things? Day 4, this is a cool day. Sun, moon, and stars. Now, that's a pretty good day's work. All the sun, all the suns, all the moons, all the stars in all the galaxies. Wow. Amazing. Day 5, birds and sea creatures. Now, I wanted to put birds and fish, but then I realized technically there are other creatures in the ocean besides fish. There are mammals. So then I wanted to put sea critters, because that kind of defines it for me, but I didn't know if y'all get critters or not. So sea creatures, birds and sea creatures. And then day 6, animals, and catch this, and human beings. Animals and human beings. Now, why is the human being thing such a big deal? Because it's us, right? Well, that's a piece of it. But it's a big deal because God talks about creating human beings in a way He does not talk about any of His other creations. He says, let's make man and let's make woman in our image. Listen to the scripture. So God created human beings in His own image. Would you circle those 4 words? In His own image. He's so big on those words, He says them again. Now, when God repeats Himself in the same verse, that's kind of like, pay attention. This is big. In the image of God, He created them, male and female, both male and female, He created them. Now, I am so grateful He made us male and female. Guys, it'd be one ugly world if it were just us guys. He creates us in the image of God. It doesn't say that about the birds. It doesn't say that about the sea creatures. It doesn't say that about the animals. The only thing God creates that He says is in our image, in the image of God, is mankind. We have this pattern that we follow here at Westside where on Thursday morning each week, whoever's speaking for the weekend does a run-through of that teaching. And we have several of us that listen and we get feedback. And honestly, it sharpens us. It helps us. It's nice to get it in front of somebody and say it. So I know I'm teaching this week. So Wednesday night, I'm trying to finish up my preparation. And I'm thinking about how do I explain this image of God thing? How do I communicate that? And I had an interesting experience. Wednesday night, I talked to my 83-year-old dad in Dallas, Texas, about 8:30, and then talked to him about 30 minutes. And about 9:30, I talked to my 32-year-old son in Charlotte, North Carolina. And while I was on the phone with Dad, I'm thinking the whole time, this guy uses phrases I use. Well, it was like listening to yourself on the phone. And then I thought, he's got my Texas twang. And then I'm thinking, my wife's right. I am my dad, which is sometimes a compliment. And then a few minutes later, I'm on the phone with my son. You know what I'm thinking? He's using my phrases. He's got my twang. And I realized that grandfather had passed things on to father, that had been passed on to son, that were being passed on to 4 grandchildren down below. The image of Southerland was being imprinted on each generation. The image of God. There are pieces of our personalities that are part of the image of God. We have a soul that is from being made in the image of God. It is an amazing, amazing thought. And it indicates that God has a core passion, which is human beings. Did you get that in your notes? He has a core passion, which is human beings. In fact, God's passion is to be in relationship with us at all costs. He wants a relationship, guys. Think about the story as an overview. He creates man and woman so he can have relationship with us. And then we mess up. And he comes back and he gives us the law to point us back to God, and we mess up. So he gives us leaders to help pull us back to God, and our leaders go corrupt and we mess up. So he sends us prophets to tell us about God, and we kill the prophets and we mess up. And then all the way at the end, he sends his own son. That's how much he wants relationship with us at all costs. So the Big Bang, the first one, is creation. And it screams at us God's core passion is human beings and relationship with human beings. That's the first Big Bang. The story continues with a second Big Bang, and we'll talk about this one a little today and more as the weeks and months go on. This Big Bang is called the fall, not spring, summer, fall, winter. Different kind of fall. The fall is a theologian's term, but I think the easiest way to remember it, write these 2 words in the side margin somewhere. There's no blank for it. It's not on your screen. I call it the rebellion. The rebellion, because that's really what takes place here. Now think about this whole story. I've got to confess to you on the front end, I've been mad at Adam and Eve for decades. For most of my life, I've really been kind of hard on these two. Here's the deal. God creates a beautiful world. Imagine every beautiful nature scene you have ever experienced, all put into one place. Imagine every beautiful tree you've seen, every beautiful flower, every beautiful mountain, river, anything, all put into one place. And then imagine that every animal gets along with all the others. And then imagine that the most beautiful man you've ever laid eyes on is there with the most beautiful woman you've ever laid eyes on. And they have the opportunity to walk and talk with God face to face. Are you kidding me? They don't have to work. They just get to take it in. Wow. How do you blow that? Evidently, quite easily. The scripture says God gives them two choices. And choice number one, I really like. Go enjoy everything you see. He literally tells them, eat of all the fruit of these trees. Be in charge of all the animals that you see. The whole earth is yours. Enjoy it. This is your playground, guys. I made this for you to enjoy. I want to enjoy it with you. I want to do life with you. And I still believe that God says to us, I want you to enjoy what I've made. I believe that. But he gave them one more choice. It was actually a rule. Avoid this one tree. That's it. Hundreds of trees in the garden. You're welcome to all of them. Don't touch this one. Enjoy all the earth. Stay out of this little 10 by 10 spot with the tree in it here. He called that tree the knowledge of good and evil because he knew if they partook of that tree, the battle between good and evil would be on. The battle between godly choices and I want what I want choices would start. He gave them one rule to protect them. Now, I have been mad at Adam and Eve, really and truly, for most of my adult life until I had grandkids. And you know what I've learned with every grandkid that we've got, all 6 of them? If you put them in a room full of toys and you say, you can play with all of this, but that vase right there on that end table, that's out of bounds. You can't touch that vase. We've got all these toys. We've provided for you. We've spent money on them. They're yours, but don't touch the vase. When you walk out of the room the first time, where are they going? To the vase. Not to the toys. Now, if you've got a really good grandkid, maybe they'll stay with the toys for a few minutes. But if you could run video in that room, I guarantee you they check out the vase. Some of you know the vase has been broken. It is part of our nature that we are drawn to that is out of bounds. It is part of who we are. So here's what happens. Adam and Eve rebel, and they eat from the forbidden tree. I really once in a while just want to say to Adam, what were you thinking, dude? I mean, seriously, what were you thinking? But I know what Adam would say. It's the woman God gave me. He already said that once. I mean, I could just picture Adam like going up to Eve and saying, how can you be so beautiful and so dumb? And I could picture Eve responding, God made me beautiful so you'd love me, and he made me dumb so I'd love you. You can email me about that. That's so good. Here's what happens, guys. Their relationship with God is damaged by their sin. Because instead of a relationship of trust, they've now broken the one rule God gave them. Instead of honoring God, they've now made a choice that was all about themselves. And they have damaged the relationship. That is called the fall. And it's literally the event in human history that turned things in a different direction. Because the garden is now gone. Not having to work is now gone. Easy living is now gone. And unfortunately, face-to-face, physically walking with and talking with God has now changed. That's the bad news. The good news is the story's not over. First big bang is creation. Second big bang is the fall. The third big bang is sin's damage to the rest of the human race. The story reports the damage of sin to the rest of the human race. That's really what the rest of the story is about. How have we been damaged, and what is God going to do about rescuing us from that damage? In fact, there's a cycle that you're going to see in here again and again and again that goes like this. God blesses, God does something good, God creates life and creates joy and creates love and creates peace. We rebel. We mess it up. God does whatever it takes to redeem us and restores us to right relationship with Him so He can once again create and bless and do good things. Only one problem: we still tend to rebel. And this cycle repeats itself over and over and over again through Scripture. Here's why that happens. When Adam and Eve rebelled, write this in, sin became part of their spiritual DNA. It became part of their spiritual DNA. They discovered we kind of like stepping out of bounds. We kind of like breaking the rules. We kind of like, doing our own thing. Now, why is that? It's the nature of sin. And I want to give you a definition of sin that we're going to use for the first part of the story. And really, it's a definition that works all the way through. Sin can be defined with these simple words: I want things my way. That's sin. I want things my way. That is now part of human nature, and it separates us from God. I want things my way. Can we just be honest? Write the side margin next to sin, I want things my way. Write the word control, because that's the word. I want to be in charge, period. I want to be the boss. I don't want to just be the boss of me. I'd like to be the boss of you. In fact, I'd like to be the boss of everything I see. We had that once. But we rebelled. And now this human nature, this sin nature in us, still wants to be in charge. Here's the problem. You ready? Everybody look this way. Control is an illusion. If you're building a life on being in charge, what an illusion. First time you get a major illness, you're going to realize you're not in charge. Get married. That'll prove you're not in charge. If you don't think that'll do it, have a kid. And let them become a teenager. Try to work somewhere with imperfect people. Go through being fired, then tell me how in charge you are. I've been fired. I've been fired from a church. You know how bad you got to be fired from a church? You got to be bad. Control's an illusion. We rebel because we want to be in charge. You are not in charge. If you were, we'd certainly have a better version of you than the one you're presenting. We're not in charge. And yet the battle is that we want to be. See, here's how this works. Write these in. God gives us two major gifts, and they're juxtaposed against each other. Here they are. There's divine love. I am absolutely passionate about this one. You can't make God stop loving you. You can't. He's not going to stop. I've had people say to me, you don't know what I've done. I said, nope, I don't. But I'll bet it's the same stuff I've done, because I'm self-centered and I like to be in charge and I'd like it to be all about me. And I've sung the same verses you've sung, and God still loves me. Now, that's not because we're lovable. It's because He is love. It's only one place in Scripture where it says God is and gives us a one-word answer, one-word description for God. And in 1 John, it says God is love. Love loves. That's what it does. He will never stop loving you. And by the way, he will pursue you with his love until the day you die. I had a friend of mine who's not yet a Christ follower, but he's a God-fearer. Kind of believes generally in God, but he's not sure about this Jesus stuff yet. Been to the fire a few times. He and I have had countless conversations. It's one of my buddies whose name is still on the board outside. He said to me, I wish God would leave me alone. I said, oh, I know, me too. He said, you're a pastor, shame on you. I said, well, it's true. I mean, there are moments where I realize he's always going to pursue me, and I might as well agree with him. He said, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. When's that going to stop? I said, I don't know, but I don't want it to. He loves us, guys. He will always love us. But there's a second gift here. It's the paradox side. It's called free will. Because while he always loves us, and you can't do anything to make him stop loving you, we always have a choice. We always have a choice. And here's how the choice works. When you have got a choice, there's one option that's godly, and one option that's holy, and one option that will honor God, and one option that God will bless. And then there's the option where I'm in charge, which is self-centered, which is what I want to do, which says that I am the boss of everything. But it also has the consequences that go with my selfish decision. And we make choice after choice in life, realizing there's a God who loves us, but that we still get the option. The rest of the Bible, would you write this in, is about God's pursuit to get us back in relationship with him. How stinking good is that? Creation, he makes his perfect place. Rebellion, we mess it up, the fall. Redemption, restoration, the rest of the Bible is God pursuing us and us making our free choices. You know what he wants? He wants to hear you say, I love you back. Not just with your words, with your life. Not just with what you think, but with what you do. It's going to be an amazing journey this year through the story. Here's the series, big idea for the rest of these first few weeks. And really, this could be the big idea all the way through the story. Would you write it in? God's greatest desire and his ultimate effort is to redeem us and restore relationship with us. Let me say it again. God's biggest desire, his biggest effort is to redeem us and restore relationship with us. It starts with creation, goes to the rebellion, moves to God's redemption and God's restoration. And here's the cool part of this book. It really is a book of light. It really is a book of God declaring, I love you this much. Will you love me back? Welcome to the story. If you'd like to pray with somebody today, there's prayer partners down front. If you're not in a story group, you can find one out in the commons. Don't miss this story. God bless, guys.